In the barren wastelands of the future, in which mankind has become mad and primal in its struggle for survival, we saw the rise of clans, raiders, and marauders. But some of these groups rise above the rest as if the Mongolian hordes of old had risen anew, but with cars instead of horses. One such group of marauders was led by a truly different warlord of the wastes, a man who was calm, collected, and rational in his approach to warfare. This man was the Ayatollah of rock and roller himself, Lord Humungus, and his dogs of war. First we'll look at Humungus himself. He is a mountain of a man, being absolutely shredded and clearly physically fit and strong, able to go toe to toe with even the toughest opponents. And in the wasteland where people barely get enough food to make it to the next day, Humungus is maintaining a physique that requires a lot of food. This not only shows his marauder's wealth of certain resources, but with his strong appearance it makes him a person people will look to as a leader. And for the raiders and marauders of the wasteland, strength is key, and he shows this by the bucketful. Pairing with this strong physique, he has a deep, dry voice and he speaks in a clear, controlled tone. No screaming, no anger, just calm and collected, with his points laid out. His voice has a gravity to it, even for someone leading a horde of the most brutal and savage people in the wasteland. He sounds sincere, almost if you could trust him. When Lord Humungus addresses the occupants of the fuel pump, he shows his charisma and ability to be the rational man of such a ruthless horde of raiders. He starts with, "I am gravely disappointed. Again you have made me unleash my dogs of war. Look at what remains of your gallant scouts. Why? Because you're selfish. You hoard your gasoline. You do not listen to reason. Now my prisoners say you plan to take your gasoline out of the wasteland. You sent them out this morning to find a vehicle. A rig big enough to hold that fat tank of gas. What a puny plan. Look around you. This is the valley of death. Humongous will not be defied. This speech is clean, not over the top. He's shown the occupants of the fuel pump and his marauders that he is in control of the situation. And with such terms as Valley of Death and Unleash My Dogs of War, and the emphasis is now on the gas pump's occupants that it's their fault, he is basically controlling the framing. And even though he's like in charge of raiders and killers, remember, Humongous is kind of rationalizing what his horde is doing. He's saying, look, because of your actions, you people in charge of the gas pump, we have had to do this. Now, this may not seem important, because obviously he's got psychos, killers, marauders, whatever. But some of those raiders might still have some humanity in them. Well, Humongous says, look, they're making us do this. He's controlling the framing and rationalising it all to his benefit. This is actually very intelligent of him, and it shows him to be far above the average raider and wastelander. He is, in a sense, a higher class of raider. He's a higher class of barbarian. He is the warlord, he is the chief, he is the Lord Humungus. As the speech is happening, Wes, one of Humongus's top men, witnesses, shall we say, his friend known as the Golden Youth, be killed by a boomerang. Very Australian, I must say. Well, this causes Wes to be enraged. He jumps aboard Humongus's vehicle and screams, "No, no more talk, we go in, we kill them all, we kill them all, we kill them all, kill them, kill, kill." Well, Humungus, being the leader of the pack, takes hold of Wes and places him in a chokehold, using that strong physique as I mentioned. This shows his dominance to his men, even over such a psychotic killer such as Wes. And while he does this, he delivers a private speech just to Wes. He says, "Be still, my dog of war. I understand your pain. We've all lost someone we love, but we do it my way. We do it my way. Fear is our ally. The gasoline will be ours. Then you shall have your revenge." Now this does reveal that he most likely lost someone himself. He knows sorrow and pain, and it has hardened him into a rough but effective leader. Being able to control your rage and emotions is also very key to true leadership, and Humongous shows this in spades. Also, the bit where he says, "The gasoline will be ours, then you can have your revenge," points to Lord Humongous never letting the occupants of the gas pump survive. Even if he lets them go for a day or two, he's going to allow his dogs of war to run them down eventually. So, you can't really trust what he says. He's basically comes from a technical standpoint. If he says to you, "Oh, we're going to allow you to leave this settlement and walk away," he will allow you to walk away, but a day later, his dogs of war are going to run you down. So technically he doesn't tell a lie, but he bends the truth a lot. So yeah, you definitely can't trust him. He's still a raider at the end of the day. Lord Humongous' attire is pretty unique. It's definitely not something most would choose in the Wasteland, with most of his body exposed to the elements. Maybe another way to prove to his followers how tough he is. And what clothes he has are a pair of combat boots, which is a good choice, but then leather hot pants and a harness with a sort of codpiece slash crotch piece. And his neck collar seems to be made of metal and leather as well. It's got to be pretty tight and sweaty in the scorching heat of the Wasteland, but maybe Humongous likes that, who knows. I'd suggest some decent cool clothes, but then I'm no Wasteland leader, so what do I know? One interesting part of his attire is the mask he wears. It's a Cooper HM6 hockey mask with leather straps that tightly fasten it to his face. But this is not just to look menacing, but it's to hide his face, as Humongous' skull is disfigured from either burns or a massive explosion. And we see his skull is completely hairless and he has no ears, so massive damage was clearly done to him. We also see pulsating veins through the skin. So whatever was done, either before the Wasteland or during his time as a raider, we're not too sure. But it must have been truly painful. But he's embraced this. He's obviously used this to make him the tough, brutal warrior he is today. And it is truly fearsome, but also makes him look really menacing. Kind of like a Wasteland mutant, but yeah, it's definitely a striking feature of Humongous. I'll note that it's said that Lord Humongous may have a military background, and his ability to organise and get the raiders of the Wasteland into a large marauding horde does point to a kind of charismatic officer type who leads from the front. And maybe after losing loved ones or witnessing the horrors of the Wasteland, he decided to become the horror himself. It's not a good thing to become, but it means you get to survive. A choice many must have had to make in the world of Mad Max. And the character of Lord Humongous came from the splitting of the traditional antagonist villain type into three different characters, with corresponding characteristics: physicality, voice and insanity. Lord Humongous represents the physical power, while Toady is the mouthpiece, and Wes represents craziness, so it's a three-way split. Yeah, I'd say Humongous actually possesses the physicality and the voice, and the Toady only possesses the voice. And Wes possesses the physicality and the insanity, but to be honest, insanity isn't a good trait, not even in the world of Mad Max. Lord Humongous also has a nice complement of weapons to wreak havoc with. For starters, he has two three-pronged spears mounted on the sides of his personal vehicle. These can be used as throwing spears, or in close combat, to lunge and pierce the unfortunate soul who must fight one-to-one with Humongous. And the weapon's length combined with his physical prowess makes it almost impossible to take him on. You would need to be well armed and trained to even have a chance against him, and if the spear fails, then Humongous can use a mace to bludgeon people to death. Then he has his Smith & Wesson 44 caliber Model 29 revolver with a scope and an 8-inch barrel. This is a beast of a handgun, more of a hand cannon, and in the world of Mad Max, especially where Mad Max 2 is set, guns are extremely rare, far more than in the modern versions of the Mad Max films. Having access to a firearm gives you a major advantage, and they're normally safe for special occasions. And he takes this rare weapon from a gun case with some very interesting details. It has a photograph of a couple that appears to be from the World War I era. The man is wearing a British officer's field uniform, and the woman wears fashion common around 1916 to 1920. There are 2 silver medals, possibly service medals, 2 Commonwealth Service Stars, a large Prussian Totenkopf and Australian Military Forces uniform insignia, amongst others suggest it's a family heirloom, or maybe it's the spoils of war, but he treats the case and weapon with a lot of respect, and there are only 4 rounds left in the case. When the events of Mad Max 2 unfold, guns are very rare, but so is ammunition. We actually see this with Mad Max himself. His shotgun that he actually gets gifted some shells by the inhabitants of the gas pump, and I think it's only about 8 shells. Ammunition's probably even rarer than guns by this point. It's worth its weight in gold. Lord Humongous' personal vehicle is a customised war machine. It features a single seat upholstered with cowhide, a powerful loudspeaker system which is mounted behind the seat on a roll bar, topped with megaphones so he can order his horde with ease, while a rear spoiler which adds to its aggressive silhouette. Followers often cling to the sides and back of the vehicle as it tears across the wasteland. The truck is instantly recognisable by its 6-wheel configuration, with power seemingly delivered to all 4 rear wheels. 2 massive chrome big rig style exhaust stacks rise behind the cab, and the front end is outfitted with brutal bull bars, where prisoners are often displayed as living trophies. Behind the cab sit a pair of 55-gallon fuel drums and a pump, while the sides bristle with weapons, including the 2 tridents, or should I say spears, and the mace I mentioned earlier. And to enhance its already formidable performance, the truck is equipped with a nitrous oxide system, giving it enough speed to overtake any vehicle in the Wasteland. We also see an interesting part of Humongous' horde arrive with him with his vehicle, the so-called Toady. He is Humongous' personal envoy. He introduces him and his many titles and accomplishments, and shouts praise for him and his men while scorning those who oppose him. And the Schmeg from Furiosa who serves Dementus is based off him. The Toady is a bit of a fool, not a warrior, just a mere pet, and the other marauders don't respect him, and who knows how he got his position. And he even loses his fingers in the boomerang attack, and when that happens the other gang members laugh at him. He is nothing more than a luxury of Humongous, not actually viable to the horde, and ultimately he meets his demise with the booby trap that is attached under Max's car is detonated when it's flipped and the Toady and another raider try to break into the car or try to, mess around with it. This is no loss to the horde, and Humongous is more than able to announce himself. Also, the Toady looks like an idiot, wearing an animal fur hat and clothes that just make him look dumb and not menacing at all. He looks physically weak and feeble, something that's really going to get you killed or enslaved in the Wasteland. He doesn't get any respect, and he doesn't deserve any, in my opinion. The horde Humongous has gathered, his so-called dogs of war, are a conglomeration of many smaller raider and marauder forces, either conquered, co-opted, or even joining willingly under Humongous' leadership, but together they make a very lethal force, and they have a large number of cars, motorcycles and warriors that very few would be able to match. And with Mad Max 2's setting being so brutal, resources are extremely sparse, making the more modern films look a lot better in terms of what's available. So being able to field such a large army of thugs, bandits and killers is truly an achievement. So the group that makes up this savage horde are some of the weirdest in the Wasteland, and I warn you in advance, these are the actual names and descriptions of, the various clans in the horde. I haven't made these up, I swear, these are the actual names just before you hear them. So we have the Gay Boy Berserkers. These savages have the characteristics of ex-police officers using old police vehicles. It's not specifically stated whether they were indeed former cops like Max, or bandits who had acquired the vehicles. However, the production documents reveal they were using souped-up street racing cars or souped-up police vehicles, and they obtained the official title, the unofficial title should I say, of the bad cops amongst the fan community. Then there's the Smegma Crazies. These are a faction of marauders driving primitive doom buggies dressed in animal skins, while the members are wearing traditional Australian military attire, hinting at their military origins. Then there's the Skinheads, named after the real-world infamous gang from the United Kingdom. They drive tow trucks and wear matching attire down to the peculiar visors and football pads covering their shirts. Mohawkers, a bike-riding faction of punks, all characterised by mohawk haircuts and leather attire, hence the name. There's the Dogs of War, or amongst the Dogs of War. These are oddball individuals and small groups not particularly belonging to the four main groups. There's the Pink Deseto driver, dressed up all in pink, even with a pink beard. The helmet of the driver is identical to the ones worn by the Gay Boy Berserkers, except it's completely painted silver. There's the Lone Wolf crew, completely covered in studded leather from head to toe and wearing aviator-style motorcycle goggles. And then there's finally the Passenger of the Landu. Wears a vintage fireman's mask and a peculiar weapon is arming this person, or this vehicle. It's called a Porter Pack. It's a gas-powered DIY weapon shooting multiple darts at once and one of the few long-range weapons available to the Horde. The group is mainly male, but there are a few females mixed in, but they're hard to tell with the group having a very large mix of masculine and feminine styles, and it's very over-sexualized and erotic, which kind of became a theme of the bandits, raiders and scoundrels in the Mad Max universe. We even see this in the more modern films with characters like the People Eater having a gas mask with a nozzle fitted on his groin. It's very 50 Shades of Gasoline if you ask me. Some key people of the Horde are seen in the film. We've already mentioned the Toady, a key Muppet, but there are more useful characters as well. First there is Wes, a berserker of a man, second in command to Humungus, and he truly embraces the raider lifestyle. Might is right in his mind, and he isn't one for spectacle or finesse. He prefers brute force to solve any issues. He embodies all the qualities you would expect in a marauder of the waste. He is very tough and resilient. We've seen this proven when he gets shot through the arm with a crossbow bolt, and he pulls it out then placing it back in his uniform. It's clearly causing pain, but he doesn't seem to be overly bothered. He's just, very resilient. He's also very strong, able to beat most men 1-to-1, except for the mighty Lord Humungus himself. And he has good combat prowess, being well versed in close quarters and ranged combat. And we see both in action in the movie, especially when the dogs of war are outside the fuel pump and a rabbit is darting along the floor. Wes turns and nails it easily, showing his quick reactions and proficiency with his arm-mounted crossbow. We also see a very odd character riding with Wes on his motorbike, a young-looking boy known as the Golden Youth. Now, the Golden Youth is an interesting subject, because at first it seems he is Wes's boyfriend or a sex slave, it's hard to tell, but it's not as it seems once I delve deeper. So the Golden Youth is very much a pretty boy by his looks, but he has a very feminine aura about him, and with his tight leather clothes, this adds to the over-sexualised style of him. But he does seem to be a part of the horde, not a slave, with the fact that he's seen holding a pickaxe as a weapon in a few scenes. And when he's killed by the boomerang, Wes goes berserk, not as if a slave boy had been killed, but as if his own son had been killed. And then we actually get a statement from Vernon Wells, who is the actor who played Wes. He says the Golden Youth wasn't actually a sexual partner. Wells says there was a deleted scene which explained that Wes found the Golden Youth as a child during a raid on the farmhouse. He convinced the other raiders to spare him, and became a sort of surrogate father to him. So if that's true, the Golden Youth is Wes's adopted son, which makes his reaction to his death make a lot more sense. There's Bear Claw Mohawk, who is a ferocious looking raider wearing fur around himself and a beastly mask to look as animalistic as possible. He also obviously has a massive mohawk, which goes with the name. And he's armed with a pair of sharpened claws that look like metallic bear claws that can tear unarmed opponents apart. And going against him would be a fight to the death, and a ranged weapon or a spear would be ideal to keep out of reach of those nasty claws. Now, the Horde's vehicles are pretty varied, with everything from cars, trucks, doom buggies and motorcycles. All of them customised for the Wasteland, built for speed and aggression, very suited to the marauding Horde's need to chase down and butcher anything that crosses their path. And most of the vehicles don't seem to have much cargo, they travel light from place to place, consuming and moving on like a vicious parasite. And apart from other large forces, nothing could contend with them on the open wasteland. But as we saw with the fuel pump's occupants, the Horde isn't used to fighting fortified positions. Even though they have the numbers capable of storming the settlement, it would result in heavy losses and risk the destruction of the precious fuel pump. So it shows great adaptation to a certain style of warfare, but the fact that they haven't prepared for the days where they may need to assault the last fortified settlements for resources shows a lack of forward thinking, as eventually easy prey will dry up, and the longer mankind goes down the path of life in the wasteland, the tougher and larger groups will become, and eventually Humungus and his horde will have to fight opponents as strong if not stronger than themselves. Maybe that's why he was so obsessed with seizing the precious gas pump for near unlimited gasoline, as it would allow his horde to become stronger, having a stronghold to raid from, and over time transitioning to more of an empire, a bit like we see with a Morton Joe in Fury Road. Now, the weapons of Humongous' Marauders is rather basic in comparison to the more modern films, obviously due to the budget and the time that it was filmed, but I actually really like this more brutal and barbaric version of the Mad Max world. We see large use of grappling hooks, thrown spears and javelins, and people armed with things like meat cleavers, hammers and all sorts of simple tools turned weapons. And range weapons being fairly rare, with firearms and their ammunition basically extinct by this point, with crossbows being the most common range weapon, ranging from hand-mounted, normal handheld crossbows and the larger truck-mounted ones, and we also see gas-powered bolt launchers as well. And most of the time the most common attacks will be the use of vehicles to ram and push their opponents into danger, such as causing them to flip or crash, and braver raiders will actually leap from vehicle to kill the occupants and claim the prize. I'm also interested how Humungus and his war dogs were able to sustain such a large force from raiding, because this nomadic lifestyle is severely hampered by the lack of people and resources left in the world of Mad Max. And there'd also be attrition over time with the raiders being killed, from various battles and when they assault positions, especially when attacking other strong groups and settlements, as any non-mobile groups that have survived this long in the wasteland would have fortifications and weapons to defend themselves. But maybe Humongous has only recently got these raider groups to work together, with the fact that they might all be struggling for prey to hunt, so they promised their combined strength basically working so they could attack bigger and more resource-rich targets. Basically, join me and there'll be more prize, gold, treasure, slaves for everyone. Basically, work together or die. In the long run, I've seen Humongous having a very difficult time adopting a more settled life. He's surrounded by raiders and nutters, and he has very few skilled individuals like organic mechanics or history men. He seems the only one with a brain and a plan in this marauding force, and even if they seize the gas pumps, this is how they would continue. They'd be raiding positions, maybe travelling further to find new settlements to attack. And when it comes to things like maybe trading gasoline, the problem would be any settlement that finds out Humongous and his war dogs are raiders wouldn't trust them. Now, he might be able to attract more skilled people. He showed that with the Toady, he can attract non-raider types for certain uses, but obviously the Toady was useless. But I'll say I think Humongous, over time, would either have to basically eliminate most of his raiding force, or make them the warrior class and bring new blood in. Otherwise, eventually they're just going to die off. Because even with the gasoline pump, they still need water, they still need food, they still need other resources. So there's advantages and disadvantages to taking it, and maybe they just take the massive gas tanker that was seen and fill it all the way up, and then the horde would be able to kind of go as far as possible on what they have. But I like Humongous as a villain. I think he's a really good villain. I think he's interesting. He's like a mix of, savage with a bit more civilized. He has that kind of leadership quality and occasionally seems like more rational and gentlemanly, but then you also see the savage side as well. He's definitely probably my favourite villain in Mad Max, even more than Morton Joe and Dementus. And his look, his kind of massive masculine look with the mask, it's very odd. It's obviously the older Mad Max films, Mad Max 2 especially, very over the top, very erotic, very stylized for the time. But I don't know, he's just the best villain. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I certainly enjoyed it. We explored some cool stuff, especially things like the Golden Youth and Wes. Some of the characters that most people don't really know much about, and if you dig deeper, they're quite interesting. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and as always, have a beautiful evening.